Welcome, Sojourners, to the Women's Leadership Mindset series presented by Teresa K. Page, LLC. My name is Teresa Page. I am your host and looking forward to spending these next few moments with all of you. We have a lot of work to get done on today, but first, allow me to invite you to connect with me by subscribing to my website and YouTube channel. Connect and follow me on LinkedIn, and always feel free to contact me directly via email at teresakpagellc@outlook.com. So what is our goal? Well, as an author, speaker, coach, and mentor, my mission is to help professional women renew their leadership mindset with fresh fire and purpose through the mediums of leadership development and coaching services. However, the Women's Leadership Mindset series is a new initiative intended to spotlight powerful women leaders and how they serve the world through their professions and purpose. So with the goal to help women realize their unfulfilled dreams and re-energize the leaders they always were. This platform is designed to enhance, empower, educate, equalize, and even emancipate, as our special guests share their entrepreneurial stories, provide valuable resources, and guidance in a caring, professional, and impactful manner. So, let's get down to business. In today's video, it is my pleasure to welcome to my virtual stage the business book strategist, Cathy Fyock of Cathy Fyock, LLC of Punta Gorda, Florida. Cathy Fyock is a certified speaking professional and senior professional in human resources. Known as the business book strategist, Cathy works with professionals and thought leaders who want to write a book as a business development strategy. She is the author of 12 books, including the titles On Your Mark, From the First Word to First Draft in 6 weeks, Blog to Book, Repurposing Content to Discover the Book You've Already Written, Wall Street Journal bestseller titled Authority, which is an anthology about the power of authorship, her new book with co-author Lois Creamer, the speaker author Sell More Books and Book More Speeches, and her newest book, Writer Crisis Hotline, co-authored with full-time author Allie Fleiter. Beginning her business in 2014, she has helped over 230 professionals to become published authors. She believes that we all have a purpose and that our stories are the way in which we share our truth with others. She is certain that authors can and do change the world one word at a time. So to contact Cathy, you can reach her on her website at www.cathyfyock.com. You can also connect with her on Facebook and LinkedIn at Cathy Fyock, as well as with email with Cathy@cathyfyock.com. And you can also reach out to her by phone at 502-445-6539. We'll bring all of this information back to you before we go, along with Cathy's free gift. But first, I want to say welcome, Cathy. How are you doing on today?
Well, it's just great to be here with you, Teresa. Thank you so much for having me on your program.
Absolutely. It is an absolute honor of mine to have you here. I'm so stoked and so excited to have a guest of your caliber to have this wonderful conversation. And I know that it's going to be valuable to our audience. So we're going to go ahead and get down to business on today. So first, we want you to tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Well, if you would have told me several years ago that I would be working as a book coach, loving it, authoring books, I probably would have said, you are crazy. But that's the way the universe works, I think. Sometimes we don't see ourselves as going in a particular direction, but all the stars align. And I knew at one point it was definitely my calling to be a book coach. I started out as a human resources professional, And then I became head of my own company as a consultant, speaker, trainer, and then author. And then it was some years later that I got the call, the tap on my shoulder to become a book coach. And I've never been happier at my work because I'm working with remarkable individuals who are really changing the world one word at a time. They truly are. And it's really exciting to be in this spot.
Well, that's awesome. So you talked about a tap on your shoulder. Tell us a little bit more exactly what did that look like to make you shift out of that human resource space to finally yield to your calling?
Yes, yes. Well, it was as many taps of the shoulder, very unexpected. I was sort of looking for what's next. I have to tell you that. I was kind of unhappy. I was working for somebody else's company as a human resources consultant. Knew I wanted to do something else, but really had no idea what that was. Was of course praying about that, but one day out of the blue, I get a call from the president of my chapter of the National Speakers Association. And he said, Cathy, I heard a rumor that you wrote one of your books in less than 6 weeks. And I said, well, actually, at the time, I'd written 4 of my 5 books in less than 6 weeks. And he said, that's amazing. Do you have a process? And I thought that was the most interesting question anybody had ever asked me. I said, yeah, I think I do have a process. He said, well, would you be willing to give a presentation for our chapter about your process? And I said, oh, I would love to do that. But he said, but wait, before you say yes, we have a couple of our chapter members who are working on their book. Would you be willing to coach them using your process and then give a program? And I said, oh, you had me give a program, but I'm really, really interested. I know this process works for me. I'm really curious to know if it works for anybody else. So I started working with these two women who are also friends of mine. And pretty quickly, both of them said to me, have you ever thought about becoming a book coach? And of course, my response was no. Is there such a thing? Is there a need? And they assured me that there were a lot of people out there who needed to write a book as part of their business growth strategy, a nonfiction book, but didn't know where to start, or if they did start, they got stuck. And they said, yeah, you could do this. So that was interesting to me, but we went on with the coaching. I gave my program for my chapter, and I've been a member now of this chapter for, well, more than 30 years. And so when I gave the program at the end of it, many of my friends came up to me and they said, if you ever left doing the human resources consulting, would you ever think about becoming a book coach? And that's when I knew that God had tapped me on the shoulder and given
Twice.
me a whole different idea for what I might do next.
Well, I think that's pretty awesome. And so you did share that you work with nonfiction authors and you are the business strategist. So what type of authors do you prefer to work with, or does it matter? And also, does it matter if they're self-published, independently published, or does it matter for you, or you just open your doors?
I open my doors. Now, I work the best with people who are writing a book about their expertise, a nonfiction book about their expertise as a strategy to grow their business or their platform or their ministry. Many of the folks I work with have strong faith backgrounds and are writing about their faith and their calling. But as long as it's to build a ministry, a business, a platform, those are my people. Those are my authors. It doesn't matter how they want to get it published. I just help them get it written so they can get it published. And then I help them find the best way for them to bring their book to the marketplace.
Well, that's wonderful. So, Cathy, if you can you take us behind the scenes of what does it look like to work with you as that book coach? What does that look like? Give us a little bit more color as far as what it would mean for an author to work with you.
Yes. So typically it's a 6-month process. It starts with a strategy session. I think this is the most important element. It's generally a 2-hour meeting. I give them free work to do so that they are thinking about all of the strategic elements of their book as it aligns with their business. So thinking about how do they want to use this book as part of their business? Is it something they're going to give as a way to draw people to their business? Is it the curriculum that they use when they're coaching or training someone? Is it a leave behind to help others remember their message? There can be many, many ways to use a book in your business. So it's figuring out first, how does it integrate? How is it going to connect to the work that you're currently doing and that you want to be doing? And then it's writing the book that gets you there. So starting with that strategic plan that begins with purpose and the big why. Why are you writing this? How does it integrate? And then thinking about the thesis statement. What is your book about? Who is it for? Who is your target reader? Which should align with your business strategy for your targeted client. And then what's the organizational structure of your book? What do the chapters look like? Is it, if it's a step-by-step process, probably it's going to be step 1, step 2, step 3 become the chapters, but it may not be quite as clear. For example, some people may be working on a memoir. A memoir is interesting because you might think, well, of course, they're going to start at the beginning of the story and they're going to tell the whole story. Well, not necessarily. That may not be the best way to write a book, especially for someone that is not well known. They're really wanting to teach principles generally in telling their story. So a lot of times we decide, okay, well, it's not about the chronological, here was what came first, here's what came second, and so forth. It's deciding what are the themes, perhaps, what are the lessons learned, and then devising chapters based on those lessons learned, and then thinking about the part of the story that relates to that lesson and telling that piece of the story. So it's figuring out those strategic elements to get started. And then once we get started, we have weekly meetings. Usually it's once a week. And typically they will decide with me what the deliverable is each week. So what are they going to turn in to me? Is it a chapter? Is it a half of a chapter? Is it so many words? But we agree on that together. And then they do that writing. They turn it in the day before we meet so that I can review it and give them some feedback. And the feedback may be about the process of the writing. How did they write it? What was difficult about writing it? But there may be some challenges that I find in the writing. They need more stories, or they need some dialogue, perhaps, or the point isn't really crystal clear, or whatever it might be. But I give them that kind of feedback so we can then decide what the next week's deliverable is going to be and what they're going to do, what that amount of writing or chapter or whatever that is that's going to be. So we do that throughout the 6-month period. In addition to that, I have a group coaching practice. So in addition to the one-on-one, I have the group coaching. I also have quite a few recorded sessions. I have an online training program and a lot of what I call master classes on different topics related to writing, publishing, and promoting your book. And so they have access to all of those things. And then once their book is 80% complete, they can enter my speaker author coaching program, where they have access to all the other folks who are either already published or almost there, so that we can talk about how we get our book out there. How do we get it published? How do we get it read? How do we get reviews on Amazon? And all of those sorts of things. So it's a very, very complete package of services. And then I've developed other packages of services as well. I have a hybrid that's sort of between the one-on-one and group. And then I have also a group coaching package as well.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think where I had the opportunity to first engage with you, Cathy, was in one of your group sessions. And I think I want to say Allie was a part of that. It's been a couple of years ago, but what I really loved about that platform was the fact that there were other authors. And throughout
Yes.
the course of you all giving us great nuggets, great information. You also gave us time to actually do some writing within that space, which I thought was pretty cool. I don't think I've ever seen that before. To give us, I think it was about 10, 15 minutes to kind of do
Yes.
some just burst of writing.
Yes, because sometimes that's the way to train your brain, because the best writing is not carefully thinking each word. It's letting it flow out of you. And to do that, learning to write like a 2 minute prompt. Okay, you only have 2 minutes on the clock. You can't overthink that. You have to write it. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of pretty cool, especially knowing that you were kind of somewhat in the room, even though it was a virtual experience, but that you were in the room with other like-minded individuals who may have not been writing on the same subject matter, but it was still such a synergy about that. And I really liked it. I think one of the key points that you were making during that session was repurposing some of the information that you may have already written. And you talked about one of the best ways to do that is to keep it evergreen. So to make sure that your information is evergreen. So regardless of who reads it in the future, it still feels like fresh, brand new information. So can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about the importance or the power of being able to repurpose information that you may have already written, whether it was a blog or a presentation, and why it's important to keep it evergreen? Can you talk a little bit about those things?
Absolutely. Well, at first, I'll tell you a secret. I think you probably already know this, that I don't like to write, which is crazy coming from a book coach and an author. But I think it's really, really hard work. So if some folks out there are thinking, I don't know about writing a book, or I don't know about writing regularly, it's really hard. I'm going to agree with you 100%. So because I think writing is hard work, I believe in let's get all of the use possible out of when you have put the effort into writing a chunk of content. Let's repurpose that. Let's use that content again as a blog, as part of your book, as an article, as a workshop exercise. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. So it's being mindful of the fact that you're going to use it multiple times. I think another thing to be careful of to make things evergreen is to watch any kind of references that you may say, especially this is true in blog writing, where you might say, last night I watched this program, or last night I went out to dinner and this is what I found. That's going to sound dated immediately. Now, it's great in a blog because you want it to be current and relevant. But in a book, what happened last night, and they're going to know it didn't really happen last night. It happened, maybe the night that you wrote it, but that was some time ago. So watching those kinds of references. Right after COVID, a lot of my authors wanted to reference COVID, as with the recent pandemic, or as what happened, with COVID and the recent issues there. I said, just think for a moment, if you read a book right now that discussed 9/11. Now that was a huge day, an important day, a day that we don't want to forget. But if you read that in a book today, you would think, oh wow, that's kind of old. That's not new news. So I think we have to be careful of those kinds of references that put a date stamp on your writing. Another thing to do is to just look and see. There's some posts that you may do, for example, that may be very seasonal or relevant for the season, the time of year. And those are great. But in a book, Not so much. So you may have to look for the universality in that message. It doesn't mean you can't repurpose it, but for example, I love to do things around going back to school around September in the fall. It's a great time for back to school kind of thinking, but that can be broader, more broadly positioned as there's times in our life when we need to invest in ourselves and our own education and moving our careers forward. So thinking about the universality of what it is you're talking about, even if you did originally write it for back to school time.
Well, thank you for giving us some insight. I guess the question for me, because a lot of the writing I've done before has been in a blog, and in some of my past books, I would probably use some of that information, just as a key piece, and especially for bloggers out there that are looking to repurpose their information. Would you recommend them taking down those blogs if they're going to use it in a book?
No, I don't. And you may think, well, gosh, that people will know that they could get the same content on the posting. Not really. If you think about how hard it is to go back through the archives and find that piece that you really liked, and if you are creating a book of blog posts that go together and you're stitching it together in a way that's serving the reader, then they don't care that maybe one time 3 years ago you had that. They're not going to remember. And even if they do remember, they're going to say, oh, I love that. I love that point, or I love that story. And I'm glad that she's revisiting that with me now. So if you've ever heard a speaker who's also written a book and you've bought the book, you know the book, and then they start to tell a story from the book, do you ever say, oh no, I don't need to listen to that, I've heard that story before? No, a lot of times it's like, oh boy, they're going to tell us that great story and with that great conclusion. So there's something about the familiarity about a story retold. So don't shy away from that, and don't think it's cheating if you are repurposing your blog content in your book. And here's a little hint too. Sometimes, I started this business in 2014. There are some blog posts that I wrote in 2014 that are really pretty darn good. And I'm thinking, will anybody, one, remember? Do I have the same audience or the same people looking at it? So I can go back and pull content, especially if it's evergreen. I can pull that content back, or just spruce it up a little bit with a connection to a current event or something like that. And it's absolutely evergreen.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So thank you for giving us some of those tidbits, and that kind of makes me feel a little bit better.
Yes.
And I don't have to take down my blog
No,
post.
no, and it's not cheating. I know some people have said, "Oh my gosh, it's cheating if I use that writing again." No, it's not cheating at all. You're just merely repackaging it. And I think sometimes if we think about the content that we share, sometimes our readers want to read it, but sometimes the audience out there who has the problem that they want solved, they would rather listen to it, or they would rather attend a training session and get that information, or they'd rather see it on a webinar or an online course. So you don't have to feel bad at all about repurposing content. It's just thinking about meeting your reader or the person who has the problem. You're just meeting them where they are and giving the content to them in a way that they would most like to consume that content.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So I kind of want to shift gears just a little bit,
Sure.
Cathy, not too far off. As you probably have understood, and maybe sometimes authors are a little temperamental, just a little, little bit, because we feel that our words is directly connected to who we are, what we believe, our personalities, and different things like that. So sometimes it can be that if we are trusting someone else to kind of read and to give us feedback, if something maybe constructive, a constructive critique or whatever, that we may take it personally
Yes,
instead of,
we usually
sometimes.
do. Yes.
Right. So in your role as a coach, how do you establish trust with your clients in a way so that they will take your words to heart, that this is not a personal thing? We really do want to make sure that the message that you have, that it stays authentic, but to make sure that it's structured in a way so that your intended audience can consume it. So when you have to give back um, feedback that may not always be a bowl of cherries, or so to speak, but how do you establish that trust with your clients so that they understand when you're giving feedback, it is for their good? How do you establish that?
Well, let me just say, Teresa, that I think this is the hardest part of my job. This is the the part of my job that I really obsess over the most and worry about the most, because I don't want to shut down someone's muse. I don't want to shut down their creativity. And so, what I typically do, first of all, I always say when I'm giving feedback, is that at the end of the day, this is one piece of feedback that I'm giving to you. My intent is to help you make your book stronger, or this piece of writing stronger, based on what I heard you say your goals were. Here's where what you have written is not making the mark, is not doing what you wanted it to do. And the other thing I always tell my authors is that at the end of the day, you are the author. This is not my book. I can't want this book more than you. I shouldn't want this book more than you. This is your baby. So if you think it should be this way, and I've said I think it should be this way, it should be the way that you want. But I will give you my opinion based on what you told me you wanted to achieve with the book. And I think that's the important thing. But sometimes I was just working with a client today, and she went out to her editorial board. She had 4 people read the book, and one person, she said, Cathy, she said, the feedback alone is like 700 words. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of feedback. And she said, what should I do with all of it? And I said, well, first of all, I really think you should read it and you should take it in. And, and here's the thing, even if you agree with what the person said, doesn't mean you have to follow what the person said. You are the author of this book. So if that's not what you wanted to say, if that's not how you wanted to say it, if that's not really the core message in your book, you can say, thank you very much for that feedback, and then go ahead and do it the way that you wanted. Now, what I also tell people is that if you hear the same piece of feedback from more than one person, then you should definitely pay attention. If you hear it from 3 people or more, you probably should really carefully consider, because you may be seeing what you wanted to write, which isn't conveying what you wanted to say. Sometimes I think when we as the author read our writing, we only see what we wanted to say, not what is actually being said. And that's the benefit of having someone else read and review our work, is so that we see those things that we are just blind to, because we know what our heart was. We know what we intended to say, and not what is actually being said.
Yes, and I wonder, Kathy, what is that dividing line? And especially with you as an author who have written 12 books yourself, what is the dividing line based upon the intention of the author as far as the message that they want to convey versus and the that feedback line? What is that dividing line to say I'm going to stick to my guns and write what the intention is versus, I appreciate the feedback. What is that dividing line to make an author go one way or the other? Do you know, do you know where that is or where it lies?
No, but sometimes you'll get feedback and you'll agree with it in, at some level, but you may decide to do something different. And let me give you a little story about that. When I wrote my first book on writing, On Your Mark, from first word to first draft in 6 weeks, we had a name that we called the negative voice that lives inside your head that is telling you, no, you shouldn't write. No, who are you to write? This is no good. We called that voice the bitch. And when I sent it out to my editorial board, almost everybody on the editorial board said something like this. They said, wow, you know, I kind of liked the term, but there may be some readers who are offended by that. So you might want to reconsider what you're calling that negative voice and call it something else. So my co-author and I put our heads together and we said, okay, let's come up with another name. We're not going to call it the bitch, because I do get the fact that it's kind of offensive. It's harsh. It's not a term that I use all the time, but
But so
yet,
is the voice. It's not
but
kind
the
either.
but the voice is a bitch. Yes. So we brainstormed. We spent over an hour brainstorming what else we could call the negative voice that would be ours, that we would own. And by the way, there's lots of names that have been given to that: the internal critic, the internal editor, um, um, the evil one, the negative one. I mean, there's so many terms. Uh, Resistance. One famous author wrote about resistance. But we decided at the end of the day, oh, we even tried some Greek mythology, because somebody said maybe there's something out of Greek mythology that you could use. And I forget now what it was, but it was not memorable. It was a term. I mean, I never even heard that before, and it was like, no, we're gonna stick with the bitch. Um, so that's an example of, even when everybody gives you the advice, you get it at some level. You may just say, no, but that really serves our purpose in a way that nothing else really does. So we're going to call the negative voice the bitch.
But sometimes you just got to.
That's right. I mean, sometimes it's just that's what the voice is.
Just what the voice is. And so before we move on, I did have another question that came to mind. When a writer is, or writer author is in that writing process, um, before trying to go into the publishing phase, do you recommend writers to have more, to expose their work to more than one, to other eyes, for that kind of feedback, or should it just be reserved for one? What is your school of thought on that? Do you
So,
recommend sharing their writing prior to?
yeah, that's a really good question, because we have had some authors come to us and say, I'm in this writing group and I shared my writing and they shut me down. They were so negative and so it was so hurtful. So sometimes we have to be careful, because we don't want to dampen that creative spirit, the muse, as I like to call her, that creative energy that can be so easily damaged. So I want to be really careful about that. So here's what I have come to. It's first of all, it's important that you start socializing the idea of your book. So I think to start using on your email signature, author of the forthcoming book, with the name of the book. I think about, in all of your materials, one sheets on your website, you should say, author of the forthcoming book, due to be released this fall or whenever it is, so that you really play it up. I think that many of my authors have really benefited from also sharing with their social media following and their their friends and contacts that I'm working on this book. And then sometimes they'll throw out a question. Well, what do you think? I'm thinking about this or this. What is your take on that? So you're involving your community in your subject matter, and they're kind of taking part in that with you, because it's pretty darn exciting to write a book. And there's so many people who want to write their book. I think it's a great way to take people along with you. But beyond that, I do believe that other eyes need to see your book. And I believe that other eyes should include, now, some fiction writers will call this beta readers. I like to call it your editorial board. And my suggestion for my clients is they find 3 to 5 people. I will be one of those people, but 3 to 5 people who could give really constructive feedback, not on grammar, not on punctuation, not on misspelling, not on awkward sentences. It's about the totality of the book. Does it all make sense? Does it all hang together? Does it flow in a logical way? Is it engaging? Does it have enough stories? Those are the kinds of things I think that you should get the perspective of, not only people who know you and love you, but ideally, if you're writing for your clients, then get an ideal client, an ideal reader as part of your editorial board. I think that's a brilliant strategy. Or it could be, okay, if I'm writing a book and I'm looking for people on my team to be my editorial board, well, just as Allie and I have, I could ask another book coach, and that would be, I think, a good person to serve on that. I could ask my publisher, somebody else in the business. I could ask another writer, or maybe even better yet, I might ask some people who have participated in my group coaching, which is actually what I ended up doing. When Allie and I wrote our most recent book, we called on 4 people that had been through our group coaching, that knew both of us, that knew our voice, that knew our style, that knew some of the things that we talked about. And in fact, some of the feedback from our team was like, hey, in our group coaching calls, you always talk about, I don't know, this concept, and you didn't even mention it in the book. Can you, I think you should add that. So they gave us some really constructive, specific feedback that was very, very helpful. So that's the kind of feedback I think is really helpful for every author, because you will not see everything. And if you just have somebody reading for typos and grammar and things that a copy editor or a line editor will read for, you're missing some of the bigger picture things that I think is important to have covered. So I'm a big believer in editorial board.
Yes, I love that term, editorial board. I love that. I think I may have only had one on my board, which is my sister, my second oldest sister, Deborah. She loves to be my critic, or constructive critic.
But she
But at the
loves you
same
and she
time,
supports you, right?
absolutely, because that was what I was going to say in my next breath. But she's also my biggest champion, you know.
Yes.
So I know that when she is giving feedback, and that's why I go to her, is for because I know she's going to give me that honest feedback. So I like that term, editorial board. So thank you
I
for
do
sharing
too.
that with us. I absolutely love that. I don't know if you've coined that phrase anywhere, but you should.
Well, I've actually talked about it in my book, so I don't know that anybody else calls it that, but that's what I call it. And I love that practice. Now, some people hire a developmental editor, but I think an editorial board does the work of a developmental editor. A developmental editor will do all those things for you, but you pay for their services, and they're usually pretty darn expensive. So that's why I like using an editorial board. I think you get more real information, more people who are involved in your subject matter, and it's more actionable feedback that you can really react to and make your book stronger.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Kathy, I am truly enjoying our conversation. I know it can't last forever, so we're going to start downshifting.
Oh,
But we
darn,
still have a
darn.
little bit to talk about. Yes, absolutely. So as you know, this is the name of this podcast is the Women's Leadership Mindset Series. And so one of the things I believe is that every woman is a leader and that she has a controlling influence,
Yeah.
um, whether it's over a particular area, a particular domain, a cause, a people, a territory, or even a region. So can you share with us what kind of leader do you believe that you are?
Ooh, what kind of a leader? I would like to think that I'm a leader that leads with inspiration, that is one that fosters creativity of but I'm a big believer, and I may have said this earlier, that I'm a big believer in community. And that's why the group coaching is really important. That's why I think bringing together authors is really important. And that's why I think bringing together your team as a leader and learning from your team and um, helping each of your team members understand how they can best contribute their greatest gifts to the greater good.
Well, thank you so much for that. And so, how would you like all of that in addition to the books that you have written, the courses you have created, these things that's going to be left for our consumption, for the world's consumption. How do you want future generations to benefit from the work that you are creating today?
Well, I hope that that's the beautiful thing about a book. They live on far beyond our mere mortal selves, so that some of that wisdom and that knowledge and inspiration I can pass along in my books to the next generation. So I think in many ways, my books are my greatest legacy that I leave in terms of what I've learned and what I hope for others.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, for me, Kathy, love is a core theme for me, and you're going to find it basically in everything that I do or that I write. I do believe that it is our ultimate success factor, and I do believe it is a game changer, even within our business models. So, can you share with us or share with the audience that how two things, how has love shaped you as a leader? As an inspirational leader that loves community and creativity? And how do you tangibly or practically implement love in the work that you do?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a hard question. I would say, as I'm working with individual clients, um, I think it's really important for me to deeply listen. Deep, I mean, really deep listening is something that we often don't do in this culture, but to really deeply listen to a client talk about what they want to accomplish with their book, what their message really is, what hope they have for those who are reading their books. I think that's what makes me an effective leader, an effective book coach, is this deep, deep listening. And that's, I think, maybe one of the best expressions of love, when we truly open up to hear and accept someone for who they are, for what they want to bring to the table. I think that is a way to deeply love and care for others, is to deeply listen to others.
I love that. Talk a little bit more about deeply listening. What does that look like for you? And how do you feel that how do you feel that we can implement that in our daily lives when we're engaging with others? So what does that look like for you, deeply listening?
It means, and I'm going to say some stuff that maybe a lot of people don't understand or don't connect with, but I'm really listening not only to the other person, but I'm also really listening for the Holy Spirit. I believe that we are put on this earth for a purpose, and part of that purpose is to love and care for and hear others. But it's also to be tuning into the greater purpose, the greater good, the greater issue. And so sometimes I think when I first started as a book coach, I thought I don't have all the answers. I don't know what makes one piece of writing better than another. But I thought, let me just turn it over. If I really listen deeply and wait to hear the answer, I will know what to tell a client or what direction to give them. So it's deeply listening not only to the other person, but listening for that divine guidance that sometimes does whisper in our ear and tell us what we need to know.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And we're not going to go to church, but I totally agree with that, that the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit, however you want to use that phrase, is the genius of God and gives us the strategy to the work that we have to do on a daily basis. I absolutely love that, Miss Cathy. Thank you for sharing sharing
I
that with
thought,
us.
I'm thinking that's where I feel like I'm going, and I thought, well, I just hope that resonates, and
Yes, it
but that's
resonates.
really what I believe. I think part of being a really great leader and leading with love is leading with a listening ear, both for others and that divine guidance, because it's there. But we have to listen for it.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, Cathy, this is an opportunity for you. You've been educating us the entire time here in our conversation, and we greatly appreciate it so much. But I want you to, what is a tip or an encouragement or even a resource that you would give to someone um, that author or that writer who wants to write, but they haven't stepped out there because they're still teeter-tottering, they're still on the fence a little bit. Or even if they're not a writer, but there's someone that wants to step into their dream career or into their dream business. Because like you mentioned earlier, you was ready to step out of that to really start walking in your actual calling and your gifting. So what tip, encouragement, or resource would you give someone who has that urgency, that feels that unction to step into their dream career or business, but they just haven't done it? What would give them that extra push, you think?
I think community, going back to one of my other core values, community, there's something about being with other people who are living their dream, who are writing their books, who are going for the big goal. And that is contagious, and it gives us courage and confidence to move forward ourselves. So I think being with people who believe in us and who believe in themselves and who bring that notion of, we're better together, and we can do so much when we have one another to lean on. I think that maybe is one of the things I'd like to share.
Awesome, awesome. Now, what about for those on the other side? They may have already published that book, or they're in that career. They've already started that business, but they may feel a little frustrated because things aren't going the way that they thought, or they may have plateaued in some kind of way, but they're just feeling stuck. What tip, encouragement, or resource would you give to those who may be already living the dream, but they need just a little bit more inspiration?
Well, I think, again, surrounding yourself with people who always have a bigger vision for their own possibility, who are tapped into their own sense of purpose, I think can rekindle that in all of us. I think the other thing is, just because we've always maybe gone in one direction doesn't mean that we aren't being called in a very different direction. So being aware of new opportunities, about things that are things you hadn't dreamed of before, um, pushing yourself a little bit, doing sometimes the things that aren't as comfortable, but looking for what's next. And that whole idea of reinvention, I think, is really important. today for everybody. But especially as we're growing older in our careers, we may not be able to do it exactly the way we did before, or the same career we did before, or whatever. So we may have to be thinking in new ways about how we show up and how we contribute and make a living and make a difference.
I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. So thank you so much, Cathy, for sharing that with us. Now you have a free gift for us today. It's the About the Author online class. So tell us a little bit about that.
This is a class that I developed. What I found is that a lot of authors write their books and then they just sort of, I don't know, they put in their typical bio or something that really doesn't serve them well. It doesn't let the reader know how they might connect with them and how they might benefit by learning more or getting more information. So I think a carefully crafted about the author is very important for everyone. So I've created just a little short program, and I'm going to be providing you with the link for that so that people can access that free program.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, thank you. We're definitely going to look forward to that link, and we will put that in the bio so our audience can connect with you directly. So, Cathy, it has been such an honor to be able to spend some time with you on today and all of the wisdom and the knowledge that you have given us. And this free gift that we're really excited about. So as we prepare to wind up for today, are there any last words that you want to leave with our audience?
Well, if you've ever thought about writing a book, I'm just going to encourage you to start down that path, to give yourself permission to give it a try, to start writing, to start a daily writing practice, or even if not daily, a regular writing practice. And if you're interested in talking with someone, I would welcome a call, a strategy call, complimentary, for any of your listeners to just reach out to me at my email address, which is Cathy@cathyfyock.com. So let me know how I can help.
Absolutely, absolutely. But thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you here. And so, leaders, we just want to say thank you for joining us. Remember to connect with Cathy and her free gift. And you can do that by visiting her website at www.cathyfyock.com. And remember, you can also connect with her on social media, both on Facebook and LinkedIn at Cathy Fyock. And you can email her, as she just mentioned, at Cathy@cathyfyock.com. And please feel free to give her a call at 502-445-6539. And so also we want to make sure that you check out the bio so you can take advantage of her free gift, as well as if you're interested in having a consultation or a meeting with her, we're going to make sure that we put that information in the bio. So please be sure to take advantage of the About the Author online class, as well as that free consultation. So now, leaders, if you have an important story that you believe that you want to tell to inspire others to step into their dream career or business, please check the bio to learn how you can become one of my special guests. And also, I would like to invite you to check out my new book, My Journey to Wholeness, Love the Success Factor. It is now available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And this book and its companion reference guide is a tangible demonstration of how God's love develops women to lead, to create, and to generate wealth in the fullness of our equality, purpose, and business. So please check the bio to learn more. So we want to say thank you for joining us for another episode of the Women's Leadership Mindset series. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, here's to the journey, and let's move forward.